I am about to be joined live by Speaker Nancy Pelosi. She has been in the news as well, with the president attacking her, including on Twitter. Meanwhile, the battles continue in Congress. The big story that affects so many Americans' life is the fate of the Paycheck Protection Program. This was designed to give loans to small businesses, that is to help people who work in small business around the country. It's already run out of money. Now, leading Democrats have argued that the additional funding for the program should be provided within a bipartisan relief package that also includes new health care funding. Senate Republicans, led by Mitch McConnell, did not want to negotiate on that and instead tried to go it alone with a vote that did not succeed. Republicans, though, are showing new signs they might be ready to work with Speaker Pelosi and others on the negotiations. Let me show you the other developing news. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy saying he would come back to the table to negotiate with some of the Democratic proposals. Having heard from the leader of the executive branch, we turn to the leader of the congressional branch. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi joins me live. Good evening. Thanks for joining me.
My pleasure. I wish it were under other circumstances, but here we are.
Here we are, and I understand that. Let's go right to the heart of this issue that affects so many Americans. Walk us through what you're trying to do, what you see as the solution in this small business program that came out of the bill you passed that has apparently run into some shortages.
Well, first of all, let me say that the lives and the livelihood of the American people are, of course, of the highest priority. But you can't have one without the other. We have to move in a science-based, evidence-based way. Testing, testing, testing. But getting back to your question, I will say this. The bill that we passed, the CARES legislation, is something that was bipartisan. We passed 3 bills in the month of March, all of them bipartisan, because we all want to address and help the lives and the livelihood of the American people. However, with the CARES Act, it was important for us to assert ourselves, and I was very proud that we, working together, House and Senate Democrats, were able to flip a corporate trickle-down bill to a workers and families first bill, bubble up. Now that in the implementation there is need for more money, we subscribe to that. We want to have more money for small business. We believe in that. The entrepreneurial spirit of America is so important. But it is also important for us to have more funds for those on the front lines, the healthcare workers, the police and fire, EMS folks, and all those who really need help as they try to save lives. So we're hoping that we can come to agreement. Again, we all want the initiative to succeed. And so hopefully we can come to bipartisan agreement very soon.
Understood. There's been a lot of debate over keeping the country closed for the most part, according to medical expertise. The president, though, I want to show some of the protests that we've seen around the country. You're familiar. I think some of our viewers have seen this, but some of it quite heated when we look at the photography here and some of the videos, folks protesting in Michigan, gathering together. In some of this footage, people will see the very protesters themselves obviously not following the distancing guidelines. And then the president making headlines tonight, Madam Speaker. New York Times reporting Trump foments anti-restriction protests, alarming governors. He was targeting specifically governors in Democratic states. Our viewers are seeing, again, some of that. What is your response to what the president is doing there?
I won't take the bait. This is another example of the distraction that they want to make from the fact that the president has said that this pandemic was a hoax. And that's not true. That the president said it will magically disappear. That's not true. Again and again, he was in denial and delay in dealing with this. This is just a distraction. Don't fall for that. Don't take the bait.
Understood. Looking at the economic hardship, which, of course, is part of the bill you mentioned that you're working on, Washington Post reporting 22 million unemployed. This was wiped out a decade of job gains. President Trump has, of course, declared a national emergency, and it notes, quote, a staggering loss of jobs that's wiped this out. The U.S. has not seen this level of job loss, the Post reports, quote, since the Great Depression. Speaker, do you view this as simply a product of this tough pandemic, or do you view this as a Trump recession?
Well, it's probably a combination, but let's right now talk about the pandemic, because that's a matter of life and death. And we're in the situation that we're in because early into this, the president refused to accept the facts. On March 4th, we passed a bill in the House about testing. You must have testing. That is the key to opening the door to letting us out to grow our economy. It has to be science-based. Originally, the president said in opening it up, I have full authority, total authority. The next day, he said, following that, he said, the governors, it's up to them to open up. And following that, he criticized the governors for the approach they were taking, which was to follow the guidelines of the Center for Disease Control. So let's just say we need truth. We have to insist on the truth as to what this is. We must have testing. We must have contact tracing so that we can stop this. People know, the American people are wise. They know that this is a threat to the health and well-being of their families. And of course, they want to get back to work and want to grow our economy. But the fact is that they take the health and well-being of their families first and foremost. We can move forward. We can find a cure. If we can find a vaccine, we put money in that. And that first testing bill. The second bill was mask, and trying to facilitate the personal protective equipment that we don't really have as much as we needed when we needed it because the president wouldn't do Defense Production Act. So the situation we're in is largely of his making, calling it a hoax, saying it would magically disappear, not calling upon the Defense Production Act to protect the workers who are trying to save lives as they risk their own lives in doing so. That's why in this package we want to protect those on the front line, whether it's in the hospitals or the PPE, the personal protective equipment, whether it's our police and fire and some of the emergency services. People are the first ones to come in contact with somebody who's in need of care. So we have to have insistence on the truth. The truth is that the bill that the Republicans put forth would not pass with unanimous consent in the House of Representatives. It didn't in the Senate either. So let's find our common ground. We all support It Cares. We want to support It Cares too, where we can go to the next step. But let's not leave people behind and ignore the truth, which is the door to opening the economy, which is what we want to do with this small business initiative. That door is opened by testing, contact tracing, evidence, and science.
And you just laid out your view of his failures coming from the Trump White House on down. Do you think those failures cost lives?
Yes, I do. I think delay and denial are deadly. I think they cost lives. And so you say, okay, that's what's then. They didn't know. And so the reason I'm speaking out, and I sent a letter to my colleagues, which I am overwhelmed by the response I've received nationally and from my colleagues about insisting on the truth, is let's not continue on a path of misrepresentation and falsehoods. Let's get right to the science, the evidence, the data, the facts. And that's what we have in our proposal on the hospitals, is hopefully to have testing with the data collection on how racial differences are revealed in getting the facts and the data. That's so important. And contact tracing so that we can, once we know who might be infected, what contacts he or she may have had with other people in their own families and the rest.
We cut away from the White House Coronavirus Task Force briefing in order to hear from you. Now we've heard from, as I mentioned, the president's side and your side leading the House. When you look at these daily briefings at this point, do you recommend that public officials and citizens watch them to get information, or do you think it is better to avoid watching them?
Well, people can do whatever they wish. I think that it would be important for the president to tell the truth, and that the American people insist on the truth. Their lives and livelihoods depend on it. And I don't really watch them because every day the president is contradicting himself, either within the same presentation or from the day before. I'm fully in charge. I have full authority. Oh, it's up to the governors. Oh, they're following the guidelines. That's wrong. And then putting in these distractions. We need central command central command where we recognize this for the health challenge that it is and the economic challenge that it is and the relationship between the two. And again, the testing from the start, the shelter at home, so important, and the president being almost frivolous about that. Some in the Republican Party saying, well, people will die, but that's the lesser of two evils. I don't think we have to make that choice. And by the way, I don't think it is the lesser of two evils. So let us, really, we don't want this to be partisan, and I've hesitated to go to that path. As I said, 3 bills in March, all of them strongly bipartisan. But as long as the president is going to misrepresent the facts, to present falsehoods like it's a hoax, it's magically going to disappear, and not insist that we have what we need to protect our workers. You know, I'm an intelligence person for a long time in Congress. And intelligence and national security, one of the things that priorities that we have is any time we're at war, we have force protection. We want to protect our troops. President has said we're at war, we are, against a pandemic. But force protection isn't there because we did not protect our people who are on the front line, and we have to do better at that. Why should it be that a healthcare provider in a New York hospital who goes there, instead of being equipped with the gown, the mask, the gloves, the rest, is given a New York Yankees rain poncho as her protection, and that people have to go from patient to patient with actually medical debris on their hands and on their faces? Come on. Let's just do this right. Yeah. Let's put whatever's behind us for an after-action review later. But we cannot allow the same falsehoods to be the basis for our decisions as we go forward. We must insist upon the truth. The lives of the American people depend on it. Their livelihoods do, too. That is our priority. And small business is a vehicle to that.
Understood on that work that you're doing. Before I lose you, a final question on a different issue. As you know, there was an accusation of misconduct against Joe Biden. He has publicly denied it. He is the Democratic nominee. Are you satisfied with his answer?
Yes, I am. I'm very much involved in this issue. I always want to give the opportunity that women deserve to be heard. I am satisfied with his answer, yes.
Speaker Nancy Pelosi making time for us here. We're coming up against the end of our hour. I really appreciate you joining me.
My pleasure. Thank you. I wish it, again, next time under better circumstances, I hope.
Absolutely.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.